Sanitization. The process of thoroughly and completely removing data from a storage medium so that the file remnants cannot be recovered. Destruction. An asset disposal technique that ensures that data remnants are rendered physically inaccessible and irrecoverable through degaussing, shredding, or incineration. Certification. An asset disposal technique that relies on a third party to use sanitization or destruction methods for data remnant removal and provides documentary evidence that the process is complete and successful. Continuity of operations, COOP, identifies how business processes should deal with both minor and disaster level disruption by ensuring that there is processing redundancy supporting the workflow. Capacity planning, a practice which involves estimating the personal, storage, computer hardware, software, and connection infrastructure resources required over some future period of time. Fault tolerant, protection against system failure by providing extra redundant capacity. Generally, fault-tolerant systems identify and eliminate single points of failure. Redundancy. Over-provisioning resources at the component host and/or site level so that there is failover to a working instance in the event of a problem. Hot site. A fully configured alternate processing site that can be brought online either instantly or very quickly after a disaster. Warm site. An alternate processing location that is dormant or performs non-critical functions under normal conditions, but which can be rapidly converted to a key operations site if needed. Cold site. A predetermined alternate location where a network can be rebuilt after a disaster. Geographic dispersion. A resiliency mechanism where processing and data storage resources are replicated between physically distant sites. Clustering. A load balancing technique where a group of servers are configured as a unit and work together to provide network services. Failover. A technique that ensures a redundant component, device, or application can quickly and effectively take over the functionality of an asset that has failed. Power Distributed Unit, PDU. An advanced strip socket that provides filtered output voltage. A managed unit supports remote administration. Uninterruptible power supply, UPS. A battery-powered device that supplies AC power that an electronic device can use in the event of a power failure. Backup power generator. A standby power supply fueled by diesel or propane. In the event of a power outage, a UPS must provide transitionary power as a backup generator cannot be cut in fast enough time. Platform diversity. A cybersecurity resilience strategy that increases attack costs by provisioning multiple types of controls, technologies, vendors, and crypto implementations. Deception and disruption technologies. Cybersecurity resilience tools and techniques to increase the cost of attack planning for the threat actor. Honeypots. A host/honeypot network, HoneyNet, file, HoneyFile, or a credential token, HoneyToken, set up with the purpose of luring attackers away from assets of actual value and or discovering attack strategies and weaknesses in the security configuration. Fake telemetry. Deception strategy that returns spoofed data in response to network probes. DNS sinkhole. A temporary DNS record that redirects malicious traffic to a controlled IP address. Tabletop exercises. A discussion of simulated emergency situations and security incidents. Simulations. A testing technique that replicates the conditions of a real-world disaster scenario or security incident. Parallel processing test. Running primary and backup systems simultaneously to validate the functionality and performance of a backup systems without disrupting normal operations. Lighting. Physical security mechanisms that ensure a site is sufficiently illuminated for employees and guests to feel safe and for camera-based surveillance systems to work well. Bollards. Sturdy vertical posts installed to control road traffic or designated to prevent ram raiding and vehicle ramming attacks. Industrial camouflage. Methods of disguising the nature and purpose of buildings or parts of buildings. Proximity reader. A scanner that reads data from an RFID or NFC tag when in range. Access control vestibule. A security entry system with 2 gateways, only one of which is open at any one time. Cable locks. Devices can be physically secured against theft using cable ties and padlocks. Some systems also feature lockable faceplates, preventing access to the power switch, and removable drives. Access badges. An authentication mechanism that allows a user to present a smart card or operate an entry system. Video surveillance. Physical security control that uses cameras and recording devices to visually monitor the activity in a certain area. Sensors. A component in an alarm system that identifies unauthorized entry via infrared, ultrasonic, microwave, or pressure-based detection of thermal changes or movement. 0-day. A vulnerability in software that is unpatched by the developer or an attack that exploits such a vulnerability. Rooting. Gaining super user level access over an Android-based mobile device. Jailbreaking. Removes the protective seal and any OS-specific restrictions to give users greater control over the device. Sideloading. Installing an app to a mobile device without using an app store. Race condition. A software vulnerability when the resulting outcome for execution processes is directly dependent on the order and timing of certain events, and those events fail to execute in an order and timing intended by the developer. Time of check to time of use, TOC, TOU. The potential vulnerability that occurs when there is a change between when an app checked a resource and when the app used the resource. Memory injection. A vulnerability that a threat actor can exploit to run malicious code with the same privilege level as the vulnerable process. Buffer overflow. An attack in which data goes past the boundary of the destination buffer and begins to corrupt adjacent memory. This can allow the attacker to crash the system or execute arbitrary code. Type-safe programming languages. A program that enforces strict type checking during compilation and ensures variables and data are used correctly. It prevents memory-related vulnerabilities and injection attacks. Malicious update. A vulnerability in software repository or supply chain that a threat actor can exploit to add malicious code to a package. Cross-site scripting. A malicious script hosted on the attacker's site or coded in a link injected onto a trusted site designed to compromise clients browsing the trusted site, circumventing the browser's security model of trusted zones. Document Object Model, DOM. When attackers send malicious scripts to a web app's client-side implementation of JavaScript to execute their attack solely on the client. SQL injection. An attack that injects a database query into the input data directed at a server by accessing the client side of the application. Cloud Access Security Broker, CASB. Enterprise management software designed to mediate access to cloud services by users across all types of devices. Vulnerability scanner. Hardware or software configured with a list of known weaknesses and exploits and that can scan for their presence in a host OS operating system or particular application. Non-credentialed scan. A scan that uses fewer permissions and many times can only find missing patches or updates. Credentialed scan. A scan that uses credentials such as usernames and passwords to take a deep dive during a vulnerability scan, which will produce more information while auditing the network. Application vulnerability scanning. A vulnerability testing tool designed to identify issues with application code and platform configuration, including web servers and web applications. Static analysis. The process of reviewing uncompiled source code either manually or using automated tools. Dynamic analysis. Software testing that examines code behavior during runtime. It helps identify potential security issues, potential performance issues, and other problems. Package monitoring. Techniques and tools designed to mitigate risk from application vulnerabilities in third-party code, such as libraries and dependencies. Software Bill of Materials, SBOM. A list of detailed information about the software components and dependencies used in an application or system. Software Composition Analysis, SCA. Tools designed to assist with identification of third-party and open source code during software development and deployment. Threat feeds. Signatures and pattern matching rules supplied to analysis platforms as an automated feed. Reputational threat intelligence. blacklists of known threat sources such as malware signatures, IP address ranges, and DNS domains. Cyber threat intelligence. The process of investigating, collecting, analyzing, and disseminating information about emerging threats and threat sources. Artificial intelligence. The science of creating machines with the ability to develop problem-solving and analysis strategies without significant human direction or intervention. Closed proprietary. Software code or security research that remains in the ownership of the developer and may only be used under permitted license conditions. Information sharing organizations. Collaborative groups that exchange data about emerging cybersecurity threats and vulnerabilities. Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, ISACs. A not-for-profit group set up to share sector-specific threat intelligence and security best practices among its members. Open source intelligence. Publicly available information plus the tools used to aggregate and search it. Tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs. Analysis of historical cyber attacks and adversary actions. Dark web. Resources on the internet that are distributed between anonymized nodes and protected from general access by multiple layers of encryption and routing. Penetration testing. A test that uses active tools and security utilities to evaluate security by simulating an attack on a system. A pen test will verify that a threat exists, then will actively test and bypass security controls and will finally exploit vulnerabilities on the system. Bug bounty. Reward scheme operated by software and web services vendors for reporting vulnerabilities. Responsible disclosure programs. A process that allows researchers and reviewers to safely disclose vulnerabilities to a software developer. System process audit. An audit process with a wide scope, including assessment of supply chain, configuration, support, monitoring, and cybersecurity factors. Vulnerability feed. A synchronizable list of data and scripts used to check for vulnerabilities, also referred to as plugins or network vulnerability test. Security content automation protocol. A NIST framework that outlines various accepted practices for automating vulnerability scanning. Common vulnerabilities and exposures. A scheme for identifying vulnerabilities developed by MITRE and adapted by NIST. Common vulnerability scoring system. A risk management approach to quantifying vulnerability data and then taking into account the degree of risk to different types of systems or information. False positive. A security scanning, a case that is reported when it should not be. False negatives. In security scanning, a case that is not reported when it should be. Exposure factor. A risk calculation. In risk calculation, the percentage of an asset's value that will be lost during a security incident or disaster scenario. Environmental variables. and vulnerability assessment factors or metrics due to local network or host configuration that increase or decrease the base likelihood and impact risk level. Risk tolerance. A strategic assessment of what level a residual risk is tolerable for an organization. Secure baseline. Configuration guides, benchmarks, and best practices for deploying and maintaining a network device or application server in a secure state for its given role. Hardening. A process of making a host or app configuration secure by reducing its attack surface through running only necessary services, installing monitoring software to protect against malware and intrusions, and establishing a maintenance schedule to ensure the system is patched to be secure against software exploits. Access points. A device that provides a connection between wireless devices and can connect to weird networks, implementing an infrastructure mode, WLAN. Service set identifier, SSID. A character string that identifies a particular wireless LAN. Site survey. Documentation about a location for the purposes of building an ideal wireless infrastructure. It often contains optimum locations for wireless antenna and access point placement to provide the required coverage for clients and identify sources of interference. Heat map. In a Wi-Fi site survey, a diagram showing signal strength and channel utilization at different locations. Wi-Fi protected access. Standards for authenticating and encrypting access to Wi-Fi networks. Wired equivalent privacy. A legacy mechanism for encrypting data sent over a wireless connection. Temporal key integrity protocol. The mechanism used in the first version of the WPA to improve the security of wireless encryption mechanisms compared to the flawed WP standard. Wi-Fi protected setups. A feature of WPA and WPA2 that allows enrollment in a wireless network based on an 8-digit PIN. Simultaneous authentication of equals. Personnel authentication mechanisms for Wi-Fi networks introduced with WPA3 to address vulnerabilities in the WPA PSK method. AES Gallows Counter Mode Protocol. A high-performance mode of operation for symmetric encryption provides a special characteristic called authenticated encryption with associated data, or AEAD. Pre-shared key. A wireless network authentication mode where a passphrase-based mechanism is used to allow group authentication to a wireless network. The passphrase is used to derive an encryption key. Enterprise authentication. A wireless network authentication mode where the access point acts as pass-through for credentials that are verified by an AAA server. EAP over LAN. A port-based network access control mechanism that allows the use of EAP authentication when a host connects to an Ethernet switch. Network access control. A general term for the collected protocols, policies, and hardware that authenticate and authorize access to a network at the device level. Implicit deny. The basic principle of security stating that unless something has explicitly been granted access, it should be denied access. Screened subnet. A segment isolated from the rest of a private network by one or more firewalls that accepts connections from the internet over designated ports. Signature-based detection. A network monitoring system that uses a predefined set of rules provided by a software vendor or security personnel to identify events that are unacceptable. Behavioral-based detection. A network monitoring system that detects changes in normal operating data sequences and identifies abnormal sequences. Network behavior and anomaly detection. A security monitoring tool that monitors network packets for anomalous behavior based on known signatures.